Thank you so much, Thomas, and the Center for Political Education, and our movement allies who have been sort of put this together in really a short time. And special love to our sort of Bangladeshi-based uh, movement folks who I've known for a long time, and it's night there. And so for them to come, it shows sort of their dedication. And it's really, this is not a historic moment. And I'm not going to take too much time with introductions because I want to get to our conversation. We have an ambitious agenda. We want to sort of talk about the conversation in three parts. One is sort of how do we get here? What's the history and context, which our speakers will share. And then next is sort of what's the present conditions and what are some challenges ahead and also opportunities. I think that oftentimes as left, we focus on sort of what's wrong, but what are the opportunities that are kind of emerging? And then ending with opportunities to deepen our relationship transnationally and solidarity, not in terms of what I could do sort of separately, but how can we move and then learn from this movement, which is really aspiring, student-led, student-driven. There's so much conversation. So I hope this is one of many engagements that we can have to really understand sort of look at the Bangladesh example and how it could be inspiring. So with that, I'm just going to turn to directly to our student leader and Shima Akhtar. And I'm going to ask Shima, as one of the active student leaders of the movement, you can Google and see Shima's face front and center throughout this movement. Tell us, for those who are not familiar, what was this movement about? My observation of the student organizing is that it was coordinated, disciplined, politically grounded, something that I don't think I've seen, not just in Bangladesh, but many places. And so how are you able to really sort of build this movement? So Shima, I just want to invite you to begin our conversation.
ধন্যবাদ শুনতে পাচ্ছেন
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
ধন্যবাদ আমাকে বলার সুযোগ
Thank you for inviting me.
প্রথমত হচ্ছে আমাদের
First
যে
off,
মুভমেন্টটা ছিল সেটা হচ্ছে
our movement,
নামে
it was called the Quota movement, and that's how it was known.
মূলত
So this quota movement, it was about work, it was about government jobs with regards to that.
গ্রেডেই বিভিন্ন কোটা থাকতো আমরা জানি যে
every single one of us, we would wonder, like, why is there this quota system?
জনগোষ্ঠীর জন্য কোটা দেওয়া হয় কিন্তু বাংলাদেশের ক্ষেত্রে কোন
So
রকমের
with regards to Bangladesh,
বিভিন্ন কোটা দেওয়া হয় যেটা হচ্ছে
so different quotas are provided
বৈষম্য তৈরি করে আর
that creates discrimination,
অযৌক্তিক
and that to us seemed extremely irrational. And on the 5th, when the High Court declared that when the Supreme Court declared that the quota system was returning, so from the 5th, we made a platform, and that platform was called The End of the Quota System. It will no longer function. So from 2018, they had canceled the quota system, and that's what we had wanted. And then what we saw, that in order to get the quota system canceled, we have to continue coming down to the streets. So we wanted the a reformation of the quota system because we didn't want to cancel it completely. Because in our country, there's many communities that are falling behind, are still behind. So with the government, through this movement, we wanted to talk with the government. So we wanted to deliver our demands to the government through this movement. So this quota movement we wanted to reform the quota system. There had been a really long time. We gave an ultimatum that please speak to us, please reform this quota system with regards to jobs. You talk about, you work on so many issues, please work on this. But we saw that the student movement, it was growing day by day, and there were different obstacles we were facing. But the government didn't take any steps to address this. So on the 14th, during the day, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina said, so she made a really offensive statement. So she said, who are we supposed to establish a quota system for? Are we supposed to give it to the children of freedom fighters or the children of traitors? And at the same time, those of us who were involved in the quota movement, they were being called the children of traitors, the grandchildren of traitors. So this affected the self-respect of each of the student protesters. So then on the 14th, in the middle of the night, we left our dorms. And before everyone, it was women students who left their dorms and led the movement. And then the chant was, who are you, who am I? Who are you, who am I? I'm a traitor. Who said it? The dictatorship, which was a chant. So it was extremely disrespectful to call us a traitor. And who said that to us? It was the government, it was the dictatorship. So that became a new chant within our protest. So this protest movement, so by calling her a dictatorship, we created a new demand that the Prime Minister should take back her statements and should ask for forgiveness. But she did not do that. The Prime Minister did not do that. On the 15th, we had an action in front of a particular place called Rajabhash. So her student wing, the Students' League, which supported the Prime Minister, they came to Dhaka University campus. And then they were extremely violently attacked us. So it created a climate of, their goal was to create a climate of fear amongst all of us through this violence. And I was there, and as a woman, as a student who's a woman, we were in the front. I know that our brothers, so that they wouldn't hit our brothers, we were in the front. The women students were in the front, but they still attacked us extremely violently, and a lot of them were a lot of them were street were gundas, which is kind of like street thugs, but not quite. And so they had hit me. So we weren't able, somehow we were able to get out of there, but we were still extremely very injured. So we weren't able to get any medical care. When they heard that we were part of the student movement, nobody had the audacity to even offer us medical treatment. We went to Dhaka Medical, and the injured students who went to get medical treatment, even though they were injured, they were further attacked. They were further attacked by the pro-government forces, student forces. So within the entirety of Bangladesh heard about this attack within of injured students, the national universities, the private universities. So when they heard that Chhatra League, the pro-government student forces, had attacked students who were injured, all of the students in all these universities hit the streets. So this attack, when we were protesting this attack on us, we heard that in Bangladesh in different places,
কোনো রকমের মায়া না দেখিয়ে কোনো রকমের আমাদের হাতে কোনো রকমের হাতিয়ার ছিল না, কোনো রকমের শিল্ড ছিল না।
So we didn't have any weapons, we didn't have shields. As students, we were doing a peaceful protest. But this peaceful protest, the police shot us directly. On the 16th, we heard that six students died, were killed. So from Dhaka University, from the halls, the students were forced out. And when we were forced out of the halls, it was the police, the army, the BGB, the pro-government student forces. They had entered our dorms, forced us out at Jahannagar University, Kamilla, Rajshahi University. In all of these universities, this is what took place. So this
সহিংসতার বস্তু মানে আমাদের উপরে যখন সহিংস ভাবে
So
চড়াও হয়,
when we faced
আমরা
violence,
তখনও পিছপা হই নাই। যখন শুনলাম
we
যে
didn't give
আমাদের
up.
উপরে গুলি ছোড়া হচ্ছে,
When we heard that they were shooting at
আমাদের
us,
কেন জানি ভয়টা চলে গেল।
I don't know
যখন
why,
আমরা
but
শুনলাম
we
যে
lost our fear.
অলরেডি মানুষকে
When
গুলি
we
করা
heard
হচ্ছে, তাও
that
আমরা
they had already started
পিছপা হই
shooting
নাই।
people, we still didn't give up.
17, 18, 19 তারিখ মানে লাশের পর
17th,
লাশ,
18th, 19th,
মানে
it was just
অসংখ্য লাশ,
corpses upon
অসংখ্য
corpses.
আহত, নিহত,
So many injured
মানে
people, so many folks who had
মানে
died.
সমাজের সকল পর্যায়ের মানুষ তখন আমাদের পাশে
Within,
দাঁড়িয়েছে।
at that point,
যখন ছাত্রদের উপর
everybody
গুলি ছোড়া
within
হয়েছে,
society
তখন
joined our side.
ছাত্র জনতার একটা
Different folks joined
অভ্যুত্থানের
our
দিকে
side.
যাচ্ছিল। আর তখনই হচ্ছে ইন্টারনেট শাটডাউন করে
And
গেল।
so that we're
কারণ
going to a mass
হচ্ছে আমাদের
movement, but that's when the
মিডিয়াগুলো
internet was
যেভাবে
shut down.
অ্যাক্ট করছিল, তারা হচ্ছে
And the
মূলত
way our
আমাদের
media forces were,
আন্দোলনটাকে মানে
the
শান্তিপূর্ণ
mainstream
দেখাচ্ছে,
media,
এখনো কোনো
it,
খুন খারাপি হয় নাই,
it was
কিছু
showing that our protests were
কিছু
peaceful.
ঘটনা ঘটা সত্ত্বেও এখন
Nobody
কিছু
had
হচ্ছে না,
died.
সবকিছু
Nothing is happening
শান্তিপূর্ণ
now.
অবস্থা আছে।
Everything is
এইটুকু
peaceful. It's
মানে
fine.
আন্দোলনে মিডিয়াগুলোতে আমাদের দেখানো হচ্ছিল, কিন্তু
And that's what the media was
আমরা
saying.
সোশ্যাল মিডিয়ার মাধ্যমে যেই
But through social
কানেক্টিভিটি,
media,
আমাদের যেই
because we were able to connect with each other.
সোশ্যাল মিডিয়ার মাধ্যমে আমরা পুরা বাংলাদেশের
So through
শিক্ষার্থীরা
social media,
কানেক্টেড ছিলাম, যুক্ত
all
ছিলাম।
of the
আমরা
students of
বিভিন্ন
Bangladesh were
কর্মসূচি
connected to each
সোশ্যাল
other.
মিডিয়ার মাধ্যমেই
We were able to
জানতে
carry out a
পারতাম,
lot
পরের
of
দিন
the work, a
সেটা
lot of
আমরা
what was happening
ফলো
through
করতাম।
social
কেন্দ্র
media.
থেকে
And the next day, we
আমরা
would
যে
follow
ডিসিশন
those
নিতাম সেটা
instructions.
বাংলাদেশে ছড়ানো
So what the
ছড়িয়ে
committee
যেত।
would, decisions
কিন্তু
they would take,
সোশ্যাল
that would be
মিডিয়া
spread
অফ
through social
করে,
media.
ইন্টারনেট
But by turning off social
অফ করে,
media,
তারপর
by
হচ্ছে
disconnecting the internet,
এমনকি কল করারও কোনো ভালো
and
ব্যবস্থা ছিল না।
we had no
এই
way to
18,
call each
19,
other.
17,
So
18,
from
19
the
তারিখে হচ্ছে
16th, 17th, 18th,
ইন্টারনেট শাট
19th,
করে
the
পুরা
internet was
বাংলাদেশের
completely shut
শিক্ষার্থীদের উপরে
down.
যেভাবে পুলিশ,
So
ছাত্রলীগ,
then what happened
যুবলীগ,
to the
আওয়ামী
Bangladesh
লীগ,
students, the
সরকারি বাহিনী
police,
যেভাবে
the government forces,
বিজিবি,
the army forces,
বিজিবি,
the
তারপর
BGB, the
র্যাব,
border guard
এরা সবাই
forces,
মিলে ছাত্রদের
all of
নিধন করা
them
শুরু করলো।
together began attacking
তখন
students.
থেকেই আমরা মাঠ ছাড়িনি,
So from
আমরা
then,
রাজপথ
we
ছাড়িনি।
still didn't give up
শিক্ষার্থীদের
our place in
আন্দোলন
the
তখন
streets.
হচ্ছে
We were still in the
ছাত্র
streets.
জনতার
We didn't stop our
আন্দোলন হয়ে
movement.
দাঁড়ালো, এবং আমরা
So then
তখন
it
পর্যন্ত
became a
3
a
আগস্ট
movement not just
পর্যন্ত
for
আমরা
students.
9 দফাতেই ছিলাম।
So
9 দফাতে ছিল
from
হচ্ছে
3rd of
যে
August, we were at
শেখ হাসিনার এই
Naripokkho,
খুনের জন্য তাকে
and
মাফ চাওয়া, এবং
so
হচ্ছে তার
then our
4
demands
মন্ত্রী
changed, and we
যারা হচ্ছে
wanted Sheikh Hasina to
প্রত্যক্ষভাবে
seek
এই
forgiveness
হামলার
for
পেছনে
her
দায়ী,
murder,
তাদেরকে পদত্যাগ এবং
and who was behind this attack
শাস্তির
on us. We
দাবি
wanted
করলাম,
them to be
এবং
held
বিভিন্ন
accountable,
যারা খুন হয়েছে তাদের
and
বিচার,
those who were killed,
তাদের
we
বিচার
wanted
করা।
justice.
এগুলো হচ্ছে আমাদের 9 দফার বিশেষ
So
দফা।
those were our
এই
9
9 দফা
demands.
থেকে আর এই ক্ষোভটা, যে ক্ষোভটা হচ্ছে 15 বছর ধরে এই ফ্যাসিস্ট
So this
গভর্নমেন্ট,
demonstration for the past
শেখ
15
হাসিনার
years,
যেই
so this
ফ্যাসিবাদ
fascist
দ্বারা
government,
যেই মানে ব্যবস্থাটা
So this fascist government system, it created resistance within each person's mind because I can't speak my opinions, I can't express them freely. If on Facebook, if I make a small post, so like a really like a student who achieved really high grades was being killed. So the strength of government forces, of government institutions, they made different laws. So this system, this fascist process they created, so it created resistance within our minds, and so we were all feeling suffocated. So we were so frustrated.
We felt like a war against fascism.
We felt like it was a war against fascism. So we thought it's neither here nor there. Either we die or we survive and we're still dead. So from the 14th, we all united for these 9 demands. So demanding accountability for Sheikh Hasina and whoever supported these deaths of killed students. So it was killing after killing. They didn't stop. It didn't relent at all. On the 4th, our close brothers, friends, allies, we're just losing all of them on a normal basis. It just became normal. So it was a situation where either we would end up incarcerated or we end up in a torture cell. So there was no way to go back. It was impossible to go backwards at that point. On the 5th, without giving any warning, it was just killing upon killing. And in the media, we didn't get any support because the law was made that way. And so within the media, there were pro-government forces who couldn't express things freely, nor did they want to express things freely. So when we found out that at Shab Huq, there was a huge protest that people were coming from different places. So the Hasina dictatorship didn't play a single card. So from the first day of our movement, they were telling us that they're not actually students, they're BNP, they're Jamaat, they're opposition forces. She called us traitors, dismissed us as traitors, then later tried to make us seem like we were terrorists. So she was crying for material things. When we got internet access, we saw she was crying because the metro rail was destroyed. She was crying because the BTV station was set on fire. She was crying for national resources. But as students, we are a national resource. We know this is our national resources. We didn't destroy these assets. But our brothers who were murdered, so she didn't express any grief, Sheikh Hasina. So she was saying that she wasn't at all responsible. She wasn't displaying any grief around the students who were killed. And what she did express was ridiculous. And from there, we created our new demands, the 9 demands. So this fascist movement on August 5th, anti-fascist movement on August 5th, we called it July 23rd because of the amount of folks who were killed in July. So we don't We don't want to call it July until those who are associated with this fascist government, until they're held accountable and they're held accountable through the rule of law. So after, can I answer a different question now?
We'll return back to you. So we just want to get everyone sort of initially giving comments. But Shima, first of all, I remember seeing you being injured, pictures of you being injured because of your courageous leadership. And also, as you mentioned, as a young woman, I think I no doubt has been kind of a key part and feature of this movement. Just a couple of things before I bring in Nafis, who wrote an excellent piece, and just to give you some context of how did we come to this sort of breaking point? A couple of things that, this started peacefully. It remained peaceful as a movement. It was really about opportunities for young people, for students, and it then became this anti-fascist movement. And I think for those of us who are in the United States dealing with fascism and rising fascism, the role of students and the Palestinian encampments, there's much to learn from the Bangladesh example. And the killings are, we still don't know. It's probably upwards of 300 to 500 is what I've even read. You also have to remember there was a shoot on site order, and there's some very violent videos. I was in Bangladesh at the time where army was just really like randomly shooting students. And the other thing I want to just end with is this idea of change, Poton or Ainaghar. And we'll talk a little bit about what is the Ainaghar. It's basically a secret detention site within Dhaka, where if you complained about the government, that you were then either disappeared, killed, or kept away from your family. So, it's been called our Abu Ghraib. So I want to bring in Nafis to, explain kind of the historical context to this movement, and then we'll then bring in Shireen Appa and Limapa in terms of some specific issues regarding feminism, labor, and vulnerable members of the community. So Nafis. So I'm just asking our speakers to just, in the beginning, just to kind of keep to 7 minutes, and then we'll come back to some of these conversations.
Thank you, Dr. Huq. And yeah, thanks for inviting me to speak about this. And thanks so much to Shima for counting those, the incredible experience in the tumultuous times in Dhaka. I remember just scrolling through my social media, like day in 24 hours, basically. I didn't sleep much for those days. And just to hear a first person count, it's really giving me goosebumps as I'm sitting here. But yeah, so to really understand why this movement became an anti-fascist, anti-authoritarian movement, kind of have to go back to 2008, 2009, when Awami League, the ruling party under Sheikh Hasina, came to power after a landslide victory. For those of you who are not familiar with Bangladesh's history, in 2007, well, actually in 2006, there was a military and a caretaker government was installed with the backing of the military, took power in 2007. There was a free, well, considerably free and fair election in 2008 that Awami League won. And since 2009, January 2009, when Sheikh Hasina became the Prime Minister, she has been the Prime Minister since then, with, increasingly becoming more authoritarian. So really what we need to look at is how in the last 15 years, how has the regime changed? Because when Hasina came to power, she did receive the majority of the popular vote, and it was the highest voter turnout in Bangladesh's history. 80% of registered voters voted, right? And you really have to look at like how, first of all, we have to look at what happened economically in the last 15 years. Then we have to look at the law and political order within the country, and really the freedom of expression for people. And I'm going to start from the last one, which is Sheikh Hasina's government passed a draconian law called the Digital Security Act in the name of protecting religious sentiment or stop anti-liberation propaganda, which is, and to explain, to go back to the question of who the traitor is, I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. And then a further, further more strict law called the Cybersecurity Act was passed to basically throttle any sort of anti-government, information from being published or leaked or, discussed in public. And beyond these frameworks, what the student wing of Awami League did was to take upon themselves to punish those who would actively speak out against the government's increasing impunity and authoritarian activities and the corruption, right? For example, Abrar Fahad, Shima Akhtar mentioned in her, when she was talking about it, was a university student who was killed by Bangladesh Chaumtoli for criticizing the treaty between India and Bangladesh in 2019 that gave unfair trade advantage to India at the cost of the Bangladesh economy. And so when Abrar was frustrated with it, he was hacked to death. He was basically killed by BCL students, where there is no justice for him, right? But Chaumtoli's impunity did not really start in 2019. It can trace it back as early as 2008 as well. There have been so many instances of where they have acted with impunity without any justice. They are biggest perpetrators of sexual violence on university campuses. They are responsible for killing non-political bystanders. One of the biggest cases is the murder of Bishojit, who was a tailor, and he just happened to be in a place in 2013 where there was a political rally by the opposition party taking place, and he was also killed by the by PCL cadre. Then there are, that's just like two examples that we can point at. And really what happened was that really turned public sentiment, starting with Bangladesh Chaumtoli League. And because the party leaders, including Sheikh Hasina, right, did not take any swift action or any action really to discipline their own student wing, that really also turned public sentiment against the party leaders as well. And then moving on to what happened with the corruption and economic sector, we have to look at, there's a lot to cover there, but I'm just going to give you a snapshot of how much money every year was lost in every single instance of like a big scandal that made it to the newspapers, even under draconian laws. For example, in 2010, $2 million was lost from the stock exchange. 2011, $350,000 was stolen from the Sonali Bank, which is a public bank. This was called the Hallmark scandal, and Hallmark was like a company that is owned by friends of party leaders. And really, majority of these corruption cases are or because like the crony capitalism, we can call it, or friends of ruling party leaders, or even the ruling party leaders themselves are involved in some of these scams, right? So in 2012, there was $450,000 stolen from Basic Bank, another public bank. 2013, $120,000 from Jonathan Bank. 2014, $340,000 from Jonathan Bank, orchestrated by the Crescent Group. 2015, $500,000 from Jonathan Bank again. 2016, we're looking at a total of $300,000, half of it from the Bangladesh Bank reserves themselves. In 2018, 330 kilograms of gold was stolen from Bangladesh Bank. I mean, and most recently in 2022, the S. Alam Group of Industries, notorious group, which is very closely aligned with Hasina's party, stole $260,000 from the Islami Bank. And today I saw a report that they actually funneled up to $5 billion from the banking system into their 6 banks that they run themselves. So all of these stealing, right? There's no accountability, there's no justice, and all of this money is like taxpayer money, or the general public is putting their savings into these public banks where they're being stolen from corrupt party leaders and their friends, right? So and on the other side, you have this narrative of development, and there are other scholars who have written more extensively about this, including Naomi Hussain, who has done an excellent job writing about the illusion of development in Bangladesh. But basically, what Shima referred to, the metro rail, why Sheikh Hasina was, crying in front of it, because her whole myth was that she's creating a developed Bangladesh look at the metro rail and advancement in the infrastructure when the World Bank refused to give any more money for the Bridge? She told the public that we are going to build the bridge ourselves. Did they do it? Yes, they did. But the cost of building that bridge was so much more expensive than an equivalent bridge that was built anywhere else in the world, right? And so much money is just being, they're just flowing outwards to people who were just stealing money from the public, right? So how does that tie in with how the financial corruption and economic development, or the illusion of economic development, are a little different from what makes the government more authoritarian, right? Because we can just call it like, okay, the government is just corrupt. Like, are there other any sort of like democratic or law and order policies in place that protects the public, right? So, and to that point, you have to see how between 2008 to 2024, along with the Cybersecurity Act and the Digital Security Act, the Hasina actually expanded the state surveillance network that her predecessor had formed. So in between, in the early 2000s, the Khaldazia government had formed a paramilitary force called the Rapid Action Battalion, right? And this is the force that was given a lot more power in Hasina's government because she was systematically removing opposition party leaders and what's called enforced disappearances. And that's where the concept of Ainaghar comes in, right? These were secret detention cells where people were just disappeared one day and they never showed up. And now they are actually being returned. Like 4 people just came out of Ainaghar after like years of imprisonment, and nobody had any idea where they had went. And then the other thing that happened was basically what's called quote unquote crossfire, right? So the Rapid Action Battalion, what they did was whenever it was an extrajudicial killing mechanism, they would say, oh, that person died in crossfire, because the narrative was that the terrorists that they had caught was, the terrorist friends were trying to fight with RAT to free their comrade, right? So that's where all of this came together, right? Just to briefly talk about the quota system. The quota system was instituted right after liberation war by Sheikh Mujib for the Bangladesh civil service, which is the entry point for majority, like the government jobs, which are white collar, right? And why is there such an uproar about it is because if you look at the youth unemployment rate in Bangladesh in the last 2 decades, it has hovered somewhere between 10 to 15%. And a government job, like a white collar one, is really like an indicator of a stable life, which increasingly under capitalism, neoliberal policies, like post-COVID increase in income inequality, a lot of people were looking at the job stability through the government service. So when the government, which had originally abolished the quota system back in 2018, they did not budge against the High Court's order, there was really an explosion saying all of this came together to create this mass movement, which originally was about jobs. And honestly, if you imagine, there are 3,000 to 4,000 jobs at best every year through the Bangladesh civil service. How does a movement that really wants access to those jobs become like a movement against the ruling party and the prime minister? And the answer is because it is the 15 years of frustration and anger and not being able to express oneself, right? Express oneself freely without any sort of punishment, the lack of accountability, right? So all of that comes together and lights like a fire, right, in a powder keg that's just waiting to burst. And I think there are a lot of echoes of the Arab Spring in 2013 that was reflected in this. I know I'm sort of running out of time, but this last thing I would like to say is the student movement itself is not an anomaly. Bangladesh's history is replete with students taking to the streets again and again to ouster either the military junta in Pakistan, or to stand up against Ayub Khan, who was the ruler of Pakistan at that time, and this happened in 1969, the ouster of the military dictator H.M. Ershad in 1990, all of this, right, all of these big revolutionary changes in Bangladesh, and 1971 Liberation War, obviously, all of these changes were spearheaded by student movement. Sheikh Mujib himself used to be a student leader in 1952 when he led the Bhasha Andolan, the language movement, right? So students have played a very critical role in Bangladesh's history, and this is just the most recent example of how revolutions can be achieved by students as the vanguard of a mass movement. And I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Great. I know there's a lot, so much to cover. And so I want to thank Shima and Nafis for giving us a really good grounding. I want to just underscore a couple of points from, Nafis' talk about the link between authoritarianism and economic exploitation, especially as we're going to hear from Limapa. The money that's looted from the banks, remember, are remittances sent by migrant workers. We're going to hear from Ghazi as well, who's going to talk about how this movement has a transnational impact. So I think we can't see this simply, a democratic movement, simply as a political one. We have to also look at what is the model of economic development. And for me, as a labor and economic justice person, the quota movement ultimately is about access to opportunities. So I want to now bring in our remaining speakers, and first with Shireen Huq. You're known as a feminist leader and founder of Naripokkho. I've known you to be at the forefront in addition to numerous civil society struggles, the freedom for expression and democracy. You were retaliated personally for your speech. The ICT, which Nafis talks about, was used against you to curb speech. How has the democracy movement meant for the feminist movement in Bangladesh? And then there's a specific question in the Q&A about the quota for women. There seems to be some confusion as to this, whether the students wanted this quota or not. Was it removed? Your thoughts on that? And just to clarify, for those of us in the US who look at affirmative action might be wondering, why would a progressive movement be against quota? It's not against, as Shima said, quotas for indigenous, we have third gender, and for disabled persons. It's for this political largesse, that those who are kind of cronies of the state. So it's really a very specific point that I think it's really important to keep in mind. So Shireen Huq, tell us a little bit about sort of what does this movement mean for feminists? And if you can also share kind of what has been the conditions for women's rights activism before Hasina and then sort of conditions now. Excuse me.
Shireen, we have to unmute you. I don't think we can hear you.
Sorry about that. First of all, I want to congratulate Shima and the thousands and thousands of our co-students who took to the streets, first in the demand for quota reform, but very soon it was actually called the anti-discrimination movement. And I think that was a significant, that is very significant, that it changed from quota reform to anti-discrimination, which meant that they were ready to take on any form of discrimination. And secondly, how the students' protests actually turned into a people's uprising, and that thousands of people joined the students on the streets and turned it into a people's uprising. I have mixed feelings. I have experienced tremendous euphoria at what was achieved, and what was unthinkable even 2 weeks before that was achieved. And I experienced ecstasy over that. But I also experienced a lot of trauma when I think of Abu Said or Mugdho, or the many, many others who laid down their lives. Who was the young man called Yamin, who was dragged down from an APC and thrown on the streets. He was still alive and died unattended. So there are many stories of trauma, along with all the ecstasy and the euphoria. I think what you're talking about in terms of opportunities and quotas and affirmative action, our constitution allows for temporary special measures, as does CEDAW in Article 4. Temporary special measures for backward or disadvantaged groups. And in this movement, the young women who were out there were saying, we don't need quotas. So who am I to say that we should still have a women's quota? I think it's high time. We've had a women's quota for 50 years. The people who are marginalized and who are not able to use the quota are people who cannot even get near the doorstep of a quota. So to help them, what is needed is not a quota, but to remove the marginalization, to remove the factors that marginalize them and disadvantage them. So I'm all with the students that no quotas are necessary, except, as said, ethnic minorities, Adivasis, and disabled, and third gender. In terms of the opportunities, I think this was a revolutionary moment, and it is a moment which has pointed towards reform, much needed structural reform, whether it's in governance, whether it's in the legislature or in the judiciary. Much needed structural reforms are on the agenda right now. So this government, unlike caretaker governments in the past, its main mandate is not to hold free and fair elections within the shortest possible time, but to actually the mandate has come from the streets, from the students, from all the activists on the streets, that we need reform first. So reform the state, repair the state, that was the slogan. And I think that is what I hope this interim government will pursue, is the reform agenda, and only then look at the question of elections, how to bring about free and fair elections. And in terms of, what was the other question, Chaumtoli? I forgot it.
Yeah, I think just generally your observation as someone who's been in the feminist movement and a leader, sort of what do you see before and after and opportunities? And I'm just going to add also, there's been a lot of media about where women were very much young women were very much front and center in the movement, but we are not seeing them in the leadership necessarily. And I was wondering if you can comment on that point that I've read in sort of various media.
I think the participation of young women has been overwhelming, unprecedented, and my hat's off to them. That the numbers, just in sheer numbers, the women were nothing like this we have ever seen before.
Yeah,
we have not seen so many women out on the streets before. And like Shima, hundreds of thousands of young women were out on the streets, full of courage, full of confidence, and full of dreams about a new Bangladesh where women will have the same rights as men, and will have the same opportunities as men, and will have the same privileges as men. So when you say there has not been any reflection of that, well, currently in the interim government,
I think you've frozen a little bit. I don't know. We'll wait a little bit. Sometimes the
Okay, Chaumtoli, she's dropped, so if you want to keep going.
Yeah, so I think we'll come back to Shireen Huq in terms of the leadership. I think just to be clear, I'm curating sort of comments and things that have been said, and so clearly Seema is with us, and there are others. So the leadership is not in the government, right? The leadership is in the movement. And I think that sometimes we look in the wrong places. But I think, Shireen Huq, I would just, if you want.
I got cut off.
Yeah, that's fine. Want to wrap up, and then I'll bring in Taslima and Qazi.
Okay. Okay, so just to end what I was saying, I think the young women have shown the way, and as feminists, as older feminists, we salute them, and we look forward to a new Bangladesh where women will have their right place, whether it's in government or outside.
Thank you so much. And I know you to be such a devoted and committed person and feminist for I know for myself as a young feminist, Bangladeshi feminist, and for even younger feminists. And I just wanted to just underscore how fortunate we are to have our entire panelists. I'm celebrity, I'm starstruck. And so I'm going to go to our next amazing speaker, Taslima Akhtar. Most non-Bangladeshis know about perhaps the garment worker through Nana Plaza. You have been an active organizer, worker organizer. You are a photographer, a cultural worker. But you've also, probably less known, but known to me, been very active in the broader democratic struggles in Bangladesh. And you've always connected the labor issues to broader democracy efforts. And I think this is something that Shireen Huq has done. I know that Shima has talked about, and I know Ghazi will also talk about. So can you share with us the significance of the movement for Bangladeshi labor movement? What were the conditions before? Were workers involved and engaged in the protest? And then lastly, I know that you hosted a meeting with garment workers with the interim government. If you can share kind of what are the progresses or futures about that. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Chaumtoli. I want to give a special thanks to Chaumtoli, Thomas, and all organizer of Center of Political Education. I believe the message of this uprising in Bangladesh, the struggle against fascism, will echo in all corners of the world and inspire the global community for a new hope for society, a society without discrimination. Before answering your question, Chaumtoli, I want to express few of my experience, thoughts. Because all of we were in a acute condition in movement. So before this, I want to say few words. Especially, I also want to congratulate like Shireen Huq to our young generation, who are the future of Bangladesh, and the student who organized the mass uprising, and also the people who have shown us a new dream, new hope for Bangladesh. So I want to congratulate all of young students and people. And it is quite impossible to discuss about this uprising and our experience and about our expectation without remembering those peoples who sacrificed their life in this movement, especially about Abu Said. Already Shireen Huq mentioned about Abu Said. I think Abu Said, all of you maybe know about Abu Said. Abu Said was a university student from Rangpur District's University. And he gave new shape and strength, I think, into the movement. And all of we know that that video scene, we cannot forget this, that Abu Said stood in front of police gun. He stood very firmly, and he he bound us and compel us to think about our responsibility. And he just break all of our silence, because we were living, and we still are fighting against fascism, and we were living in a condition of fear, and we don't have any freedom of expression. We don't have a right of vote. So, but all the time we feel self-censorship also. So I think that Abu Said bound us to break our silence. So I want to remember Abu Said, and I want to remember other children who died in this movement. Like maybe you know that 4-year kids Abu Ahad, he died when police killed him. Young Ria Gop, she also died. One of our young friend Shakil, who was a member of Bangladesh Student Federation, he was also killed by the ruling party's goons. And I also want to remember those garment workers who were also killed in this movement. Maybe we know about the young student who sacrificed their life, who killed by police. We know a little bit about other workers, other peoples, but we don't know enough about garment workers. So 6 garment workers, as far we know, they also killed by the fascist regime. And I think everybody had a very critical time for last whole month of the July. And I felt that I'm living in a warlike condition, because I born just 3 years after 71. So I have no direct experience about war, but I felt that I'm living in a war condition. We couldn't stay home. There was no internet, no bank, curfew, threats from the government, and their goons, along with we are always under threat of attack, killings. So it was I think most of the Bangladeshi people will agree with me that we felt that we couldn't breathe properly in the regime, and especially the last July. Finally, Sheikh Hasina regime bound to resign, but our fight was not against only Sheikh Hasina as a person, it was against fascist regime. So I just wanted to share these things, but when the interim government make the government, and we thought that it's very important to raise our demands and our expectation about Bangladeshi garment workers, because more than 4 million Bangladeshi garment workers are working in this sector, and this sector is very much important for our economy. More than 80% foreign export comes from this sector. So we thought it is the time to give a scenario of problem and possibilities of garment sector and garment workers. So we demanded 11 points in front of press, and we share we exchange our views with other garment workers organization, other women organization, and other people, and we tried to raise 11 points for the improvements of garment workers. Within this 10 point, we focused on justice for dead who died in this movement. Also, we mentioned the 6 garment workers who died in this movement. We want justice and compensation for them, and we also mentioned those 4 workers who died in 2023 in wage movement, and they hadn't got justice and any kind of compensation. And maybe you know that when the minimum wage movement going on, that time the government and the owner, they filed 1,000 cases against workers and workers leader. So we also pointed about withdrawal of all repressive cases. We talked about the because last year when minimum wage was going on, that time the Bangladeshi garment workers wage was like $65 to $67. After the movement, they started to get like $105 or $6. but they demanded 25,000 taka, but finally it become 12,500 taka. And that minimum wage board was highly controlled by government and owner. So we think maybe we can raise this point also to think about reformation of wage board and reevaluate the minimum wage demand that garment workers demanded in 2023. And also we focused on the need of real union, because we feel that in Bangladesh, where a fascist regime working everywhere, fear. So we think that the real union is very much important, and the corrupted union is the biggest problem of the organizing and working and mobilizing workers. So we emphasize on unions, real unions, and we also talked about daycare. We also talked about the maternity leave in Bangladesh. Garment workers' maternity leave is now 4 months. We demanded 6 months. We talked about anti-sexual harassment policy and other demands of garment workers. Especially, we focused on 11 demands, and we tried to get opinion from other workers' organization and other stakeholders to make a shape of these demands. And we are thinking to give a paper on our demands to interim governments, because we think that this is the time to make accountable and make transparent the system. So maybe interim government, we can make pressure on them to think about the Bangladeshi garment workers who are also young and who are sacrificing their youth for Bangladeshi economy. So we are struggling for a new Bangladesh and a new living condition, dignified life for Bangladeshi garment workers. I think now I can stop and maybe talk later again. Thank you, Chaumtoli.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Lima. And I think that the one thing too that you've talked about is that garment workers and workers in Bangladesh have experienced this brutality in Bangladesh, through in 2023 with the wage movement, but ongoing, and the filing of false charges, of using the law and law enforcement. This is something that working class people have experienced. And so it just, that with each year has gotten more brutal, as Shima related. There are a number of questions. We do have limited time, so I want to make sure we go through all our speakers. But there is been one question, Lima, about the composition of the interim government. I don't know if you want to answer now or later, is that there isn't a labor, given the 4 million workers, given that the economy is such an important part of the new Bangladesh, there isn't a representative on the interim government from the labor movement. Can you respond to that?
In our discussion, some of our discussion also raised this issue that we need a workers' representative, because when we saw the wage board in our country in 2023 or 2018, we found a representative who actually represent owner or government, not actually the workers. So we think this is also important to think about the representative from workers. And we also talked about justice for Rana Plaza's and Tazreen survivors and who died that time. And yeah, we talked about Rana Plaza issue also in our discussion.
Great. So I'm going to bring in Kazi Fauzia, who is a very well-respected community-based organizer. She's the director of organizing for DRUM. She's been instrumental also in building multiracial working class solidarity around the success of the delivery workers. So she doesn't just work in the South Asian community and has been also very much involved in active in Bangladeshi organizing. And so I wanted to invite you to share what impressed you most about the movement, and also what are the implications of this movement for the diaspora that many of those who are co-sponsoring, and maybe our guests are predominantly in the diaspora, what's the implications of this movement? You know, sort of when people say, why should we care? I mean, I know we care. There's about 300 people on the Zoom, so we do care, but can you share a little bit about that? Thank you, Ghazi.
Thank you, Chaumtoli. All of you know, my name is Ghazi Fauza. I'm work with Drum. This is Rising Up and Moving, but I'm just telling you today, I'm not representing only Drum today. I'm also representing myself as a Bangladeshi activist, because I want to clarify my position today when I'm talking, because probably a lot of things I'm going to talk, which one you will try to see who I am defend or whatever. So as an activist, this uprising, I'm seeing so many things from really far. I just want to mention, I live in USA 16 years. I live in New York 16 years. So probably people think, oh, someone who living in 16 years, what's supposed to concern for them, what happening in Bangladesh? I just want to tell you, the movement, the quota movement, look like this is starting with the quota and ending is a ekdafa. I mean, one demand, authoritarian government need to go. But I'm telling you, is behind lot of organizing behind this structurally. If you remember 2018, there is a road safety movement, a student in the state, and they fought. I want to mention that time I'm so impressed and I'm so emotional, and I saying 100,000 Bangladeshi taka for the water and the cookies. And one of my friend distributed that one for, she distributed this cookies and water, and she took some picture to send me to prove she is distributing. And she kept by Satrolik, and she is in jail. She's unmarried, young girl, go to jail for 1 month and 16 days. Think about the trauma I feel from USA. Feel guiltness. And also lot of my work to support immigrant here. So that's the reason this the past government thought I was the betrayer. I betray my country. That's why when I go to country, I am undercover by law enforcement because of my work here in New York. And the current uprising, my caretaker, house caretaker, killed by police, and also another my tenant shot by police. So even I live 12,000 miles far from Bangladesh, I am impacted, and I am seeing this thing as an impacted person, as an activist, and as an organizer. Is not unorganized force go and down the government. These student group are very organized. If you see their coordinations, if you see their strength, if you see their communications, if you saw everything, how they communicate with each other, how they bring the more forces to the movement, is not unorganized, is not just someone jump on quota and down the regime. It's something else, very structure-wise. As a left political activist, I'm seeing this as a united front method. The students go to the state, fight for the quota. They realize they're targeted by government. They are using Razakar word. They feel emotional. They lot of other private university join with them, and they start killing people. When Abu Said and a lot of people die, Brak University in my neighborhood, Badda, who actually uprise and go to support the Dhaka University, and when Brak University under attack, Eastwest and other university come to support them. Like the solidarity label, see the solidarity label. The lot of private students just put their life on the front line and raise for the main university, I mean government university. Lot of people not going to as an opportunist protect the quota or down the quota is something else, because rickshawala, they call rickshawala mama, the thousand rickshawala go to the protest to save the student or bring the student without rent to the Dhaka University is not like people just spontaneously just act. this is the people oppressed by local Awami League, give them every single day money. It's called chanda. I mean, they have to pay them every single day. The people who come down to support a student, these people losing their voting rights, people are oppressed. If you see the movement itself, like how thousand women come to the street, the student women come to the street, see their identity. Bangladesh is a problem with the identity politics. People divided people with their hijab, with their niqab, with their tupi, with their dari, how they look like. The whole my life, I always heard from Bangladeshi activists, I am a Razakar, I am a Jamaat, because I do hijab. I can be socialist. Socialist never can be with the hijab. That's not something true. So I am a hidden Jamaat. So this is something, the political, the ideological, the theoretical, something student broke. That's why you see millions hijabi women in the state, million niqabi women in the state, million young girl in the state. All people, all force join to the student, even the janota, even the regular soldier. This I call oppressed people become powerful against oppressor. So is a united front. Either is happen structurally, plan, or without plan. It is a united front. It is a simple language. All oppressed, marginalized come together to fight against the oppressor. I don't know how long these alliances will be together. I don't know what is the plan for a student coordinator or leader to build this alliance strongly, not divided people how they look like, not divided people what they wear, not divided people with like a lot of the theoretical, ideological identity. Because what Shireen Appa said, Bangladesh still need to be work, or this interim government need to be work against who's called anti-discriminatory system. System itself is not only 15 years, system itself discriminated their own citizen, own people, structurally is long. It's not only 15 years authoritarian government, Hasina regime create this system, is a more beyond this. So then is a big task in front of the interim government, how they want to do the reform. If they want to the reform, who will be their alliances? Who will be work together to make it happen? So as a Bangladeshi activist, I'm looking something very vigor, this uprising, and telling you it is huge success currently for us, what students lead and bring state all forces together to fight against oppression. So I want to stop here. I can talk later if there is any specific question related to me.
Right. Thank you. I'm going to ask if our panelists can, if there are specific questions in the Q&A to perhaps, you can answer them. Just, I want to keep our conversation going. And also there's been a number of requests to connect with each of you, ways to support. So we're going to get to that. I'm going to now move to, we talked about the history. Everyone has spoken as to their direct involvement and impressions of kind of what has happened to now, what are the challenges? And there are a couple of questions around that. I do think Shireen Appa's framework as a anti-discrimination, anti-fascist movement is a way to think about this. Shima, you had a phenomenal interview where you talked about, and I shared this, you said that every uprising is meant with a counter-revolutionary or counter-uprising. You said that we have to be vigilant to make sure that the revolutionary gains of the student and the anti-fascist movement and the anti-discrimination movement are kept. So I want to talk about that in our remaining time. We started a little bit later, so if it's okay, we will just extend for a few minutes. So Eunice has said that every ministry would have a student. How can the interim government be held accountable to student demands and the movement What are the current demands of the movement? Because the movement isn't the government, right? The movement is much broader than that. So, and if you can share also, what do you see as challenges? And I'm gonna invite other speakers to speak on specific challenges, on the violence, on particularly against minority communities. But there's also been some heartening examples of traffic control. I mean, who knew, students can do traffic control, cleanup, guarding of homes of minorities. So Shima, tell us a little bit about what you meant about every uprising leading to a counter, and what's the role now of the movement vis-a-vis the government?
হ্যালো, শুনতে পাচ্ছেন?
হ্যাঁ, শুনতে পাচ্ছি।
শোনা যাচ্ছে।
5 তারিখে যে ঐতিহাসিক
on
জয়
the
হয়েছে
5th, the
ছাত্র জনতার,
historic
এই
victory that
জয়টার
the
পরে
students had,
আমাদের ছাত্রদের
after this
মূলত
victory,
তাদের
for us as
কাঁধে দায়িত্ব
students,
নিতে হয়েছে পুরা
so we
দেশটার।
had to take
কারণ
responsibility
বিভিন্ন
for the
জায়গায়
country
হচ্ছে ডাকাতি হচ্ছিল,
because in different places there were robberies,
মানে মন্দিরগুলোতে হামলা হচ্ছিল,
in
হিন্দুদের
temples there were
বাড়িতে অ্যাটাক
attacks,
হচ্ছিল,
and Hindu
তারপর হচ্ছে
homes were
নারীরা
being
বিভিন্ন
attacked,
ঝামেলায় পড়ছিল,
women were facing
তো
issues as
নারী
well.
শিক্ষার্থীরা বিশেষ করে। এই যে বিশৃঙ্খল পরিস্থিতিটা,
So
সেটা
this
হচ্ছে ছাত্রদের
lack
হাতে
of law and
তুলে
order,
নিয়েছে
this
এবং
disorder, chaos,
এই ছাত্ররা
students decided
হচ্ছে
to take it on,
পুরা এলাকা পাহারা দিয়েছে,
and these
ট্রাফিক
students
সিগন্যাল নিয়ন্ত্রণ করছে,
kept safety in
তারপর হচ্ছে
neighborhoods,
বাজার নিয়ন্ত্রণ করছে,
maintained
মনিটরিং করছে,
traffic,
বাজারের
monitored traffic,
বাজার মনিটরিং করছে। তারপর হচ্ছে
monitored
আমরা
the
যারা
situation
আহত
in different
হয়েছে
places.
তাদের
For
ফান্ড
those of us who were
তাদের জন্য ফান্ড
injured,
কালেক্ট করছি।
we collected
তারপর
funds
হচ্ছে
for them
আমাদের
to gain
বৈষম্য বিরোধী
treatment,
আন্দোলন
medical
যে
treatment.
প্ল্যাটফর্মটা,
Those
সেটা
of us who
থেকে
were our
আমরা হচ্ছে
platform
একটা
fighting against
রেজিস্ট্যান্স
discrimination.
উইক নামে একটা কর্মসূচি পালন করছি।
So we
সেটা
made a
মানে হচ্ছে
resistance wing.
যে আমরা ইতিহাস থেকে শিক্ষা
So
পাই যে
learning from
একটা
our history,
বৈপ্লবিক পরিবর্তনের সাথে সাথে
so
সেই
revolutionary
বিপ্লবটাকে প্রশ্নবিদ্ধ
change.
করার জন্য বিভিন্ন
So there's to
ষড়যন্ত্র চলতে
counter,
থাকে, এবং
there's
যারা
counter
যেই
forces to
এই
stop that
বিপ্লবের
revolutionary
মাধ্যমে
movement.
যেই
And through this revolution,
হেরে যাওয়া পার্টিটা থাকে, সেই হেরে
the
যাওয়া
party that
পার্টিটা
loses in the
বিভিন্নভাবে
revolution,
পায়তারা
that
করতে
party
থাকে
that
এই
loses
আন্দোলনটাকে
does
নস্যাৎ করার
different
জন্য।
things
এই
to
আন্দোলনটাকে
ruin the student movement, to
ইন্টারন্যাশনালি
sabotage the
মানে
student movement.
আন্তর্জাতিকভাবে
So
এমন
in an
ভাবে দেখানো
international way,
যেন
it
হচ্ছে
shows
আমাদের
it,
আন্দোলনটাকে প্রশ্নবিদ্ধ
it
করা
shows it
যায়।
in a
যে আমরা
way
দেখতে পাচ্ছি
that
যে
undermines our student
যে
movement.
মানে হিন্দু মুসলমান দাঙ্গা
So we can
এমন
see
এমন
Hindu-Muslim
ভাবে দেখানো
issues,
হচ্ছে যে
conflicts.
বাংলাদেশে
It's
হচ্ছে
being shown in a way that Bangladesh is being
কোন
depicted in a
রকমের
way
ধর্মীয় সম্প্রীতি নাই। আমরা দেখতে
that
পেয়েছি
Bangladesh
যেমন
has no like
আন্দোলনে
peace
মানে
between different communities,
হিজাব
different
পরা,
religions,
বোরখা পরা
religious
নারীরা ছিল,
communities.
তেমনি টি
Those
শার্ট পরা
women who
নারীও
were
ছিল।
wearing,
তো
in our movement, we could see there
টুপি
were
পরা
women who
ভাই
were
ছিল,
wearing
আবার
hijabs
টুপি
and
ছাড়া, আবার
burqas, and those
হিন্দুরাও
wearing clothes,
আন্দোলনকারী, হিন্দু আন্দোলনকারীও আবার সমন্বয়ক যারা
wearing
অর্গানাইজার,
t-shirts.
তারাও ছিলেন
And
হিন্দু
we
সম্প্রদায়
had
থেকে।
Hindu
তো আমাদের
students
যেই
who were organizers within our
ছাত্র
movement.
জনতার যেই মানে অবিভক্ত এক দফা অবিভক্ত একটা আন্দোলন, সেই আন্দোলনটাকে বিভক্তির একটা জায়গায়
our student
উপস্থাপন করা
movement
যেতে
was
পারে।
not sectarian, was
আবার হচ্ছে
sectarian.
বিপ্লব, এই মহাবিপ্লবের এগেইনস্টে বিরুদ্ধে একটা প্রতি বিপ্লব হতে পারে।
So we can see there might be a counter. The party that was pushed out of power might start a counter-revolutionary movement, and we see that as a challenge that we're facing every single day.
বিভিন্ন ক্যাম্পাসে আমাদের
In different neighborhoods and different universities, we have to take responsibility.
আমরা এখনো রাজপথ ছাড়ি নাই, এবং
So we want to make clear that we have not yet left the
তৈরি করতে
streets,
চাইলে আমরা ছাত্র
and
জনতা
anybody who wants to
এতদিন
create
ছিলাম
chaos
রাস্তায়,
in this
আর
environment,
কিছুদিন
those of us students who are in the streets all of these days will continue in the streets. And the independence and freedom that we gained in 2024, the independence we gained from fascism, we are going to hold on to that freedom. And for the student movement's victory, we're going to hold on to that. And because of that, we're going to celebrate Resistance Week, and we're going to continue moving our work forward. Should I ask the question about the departments, about the government?
Please. I think Amra, because you, Shireen Appa, and Lima Appa are in Bangladesh and late, we want you to speak a little bit more. So please take your time.
যখন অন্তর্বর্তীকালীন সরকার গঠন হলো,
so when the interim government was created, as a woman student protester,
যাই বলেন, একজন ছাত্রদের থেকে দুইজন ছাত্র উপদেষ্টা, পুরুষ ছাত্র উপদেষ্টা গিয়েছেন।
There were 2 male students who joined the interim government.
মানে ন্যায্যতার ভিত্তিতেও আমি মনে করি যে একজন নারী শিক্ষার্থীও সেই জায়গাটা ধরার মতো, সেই জায়গাটায় যাওয়ার মতো যোগ্যতা রাখে। তো একজন নারী শিক্ষার্থী হিসেবে এটা আমার চাওয়া ছিল আর কি।
I did want a woman student to participate. I think we definitely have the skill set to be able to join the interim government. But I think through getting rid of overthrowing the fascist government, and through this movement, the students,
দেশের জন্য প্রাণ দেওয়া শিখে গিয়েছি।
We learned how to sacrifice our lives for our country and how to become martyrs for our country through this movement. And this courage that we gained to run our country, to fight for our country, all of the injustice that existed under the fascist system, it wasn't just Hasina. It wasn't just the former Prime Minister. Fascism is a system where people,
ক্ষমতায় গেলেই একটা
when people come to power,
হিসেবে রূপান্তরিত সহজেই হতে পারে।
they can easily become a murderer, easily become a killer. We don't want this system anymore. We want a democratic change, democratic reform. We want a democratic country where people can have a safe, healthy life. We can enjoy human rights. We don't want to feel suffocated. The thoughts that we have, we can express them, we can give our votes. We haven't been able to vote since our birth, since becoming voters. This generation wasn't this like joy from being able to vote, this democratic right that I can choose an elected official. I never even had that opportunity. So with regards to every situation as a Bangladeshi citizen, I've lost my rights. And this you can see on August 5th, the parliament, like Army League centers. We went to the parliament. What can I say? There was people took so much out of the parliament. They even if there was a hanger, they took that. And that was an expression of their dissent because they cut my rights. They took away my rights, the government, the previous government. So the discrimination that they created between rich and poor, the gap between rich and poor. So that was a demonstration of the frustration of the public by taking those things. So which way this country, in terms of the future of the country, so as a policymaker, we're working as policymakers now. It makes me really proud that this new generation of students, that if we're a part of the government, that this fascist system
বৈষম্য তৈরি হয়েছে এই
this
বৈষম্য
fascist
দূর
system that
করার
created
ক্ষেত্রে আমরা
discrimination and
নতুন
inequality,
জেনারেশন কাজ করতে পারবো
that we're
স্বৈরতন্ত্রের
working to
পতনের মধ্য
dismantle
দিয়ে
that.
একটা নতুন বন্দোবস্ত প্রতিষ্ঠার দাবি দাবি
So we have
অলরেডি উঠছে যার
so
মাধ্যমে
we have new
বাংলাদেশ একটা
demands we
নতুন
created in terms to
গণতান্ত্রিক
create a democratic
ব্যবস্থায়
government.
ও যেখানে একটা ন্যায় ভিত্তিক সমাজ গড়ে ওঠার
So
সম্ভাবনা
we
তৈরি
want to
হয়েছে
create
আর
now
সেটার
there's a
হচ্ছে
possibility of creating a society that doesn't uphold
সেটা
these
তৈরির প্রথম
inequalities.
পদক্ষেপ হচ্ছে ছাত্ররা তারপর হচ্ছে
And the
ছাত্র
first
জনতার
step towards creating that
যেই
society is the students
অংশগ্রহণ স্বতঃস্ফূর্ত অংশগ্রহণ ঘটে
and
সেটা আমি
the
মনে করি যে
participation of students.
ঐতিহাসিকভাবে বাংলাদেশকে
I
একটা
think that's
নতুন একটা
really
রূপ দিতে পারে
historic and
এবং
it's giving Bangladesh a
বাংলাদেশকে
new start
সত্যিকারের উন্নয়নের পথে নিয়ে যেতে
and
পারে
to bring it to the path of
Thank you
true
so much. I
development.
think there's so much you've said, and I want to have you and other student leaders come back because there's so much lessons in terms of organizing. And I want to just highlight two things and then bring in Shireen Appa and Lima Appa. One is that even though there's an interim government, the movement remains, and the movement will continue to remain and put pressure on whatever formation. I think this is very important. So it's not like, oh, we're going to sort of give up everything into this formation. We know that, and I am a law professor, I know the way that law actually can be used to oppress people. And I think that the level of political sophistication that I've experienced directly from the student leaders comes out of years of movement engagement. You don't get this just from studying. You get this by being, in the mater, the field, right? The other thing is the resistant week. It's something that maybe we should think about is political education. We should always, and this is a shout out to the center and Thomas's work, is we have to educate ourselves. Like what happens historically, what Shima was mentioning. So I wanted to kind of highlight these two points. And the third one is, it's not about one individual. In the United States, we're focused on Trump versus Harris, that there is a whole structure of fascism that we have to fight against. And so I think that these are really 3 points, which I hope we can talk about much more. I want to bring in Shireen Appa, and some of the questions touch on this. Minority rights have been raised as a challenge for this new government. What groups are vulnerable? And why is this a challenge? And can you speak specifically to the reports of Bangladesh Hindu violence, and because I think that has been in the media. And then lastly, I know it's a lot of questions, but there's a lot of media disinformation about this as well. So how do we navigate at the same time protecting minority rights, right? Because we know that that's important. At the same time, address this sort of very self-interested India propaganda. And we're going to talk a little bit about the impact on the region with Nafis and Ghazi. But minority rights generally, if you can talk a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, there are different groups who are vulnerable.
Yeah.
And different Adivashi groups are vulnerable, different religious minorities are vulnerable, different ethnic minorities are vulnerable. And that vulnerability is there around the year and at all times. But then they peak into violent forms or manifest into violence at particular moments in history. And this was one moment when this happened. Now, the entire dynamics of what happened and why it happened and who consumed this violence is not entirely clear yet, but at least in Chittagong, it was found that Army League leaders were behind the violence in terms of attacking Hindu temples. So a retreating force is also often involved in committing such violence in order to discredit the revolution, discredit the students, discredit the new government. I think what is happening in the media, particularly the Indian media, is... Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. But what is happening in the Indian media is way, way, way exaggerated. They are even using false footage to describe the situation here. And this is a problem that we have with the situation between Indian media and what happens in Bangladesh. And I'm afraid that sometimes the Indian media is playing the Modi card and using this to cover a, well, I don't know whether that will be an overstatement or not, whether this is an excuse or a plea to continue the pogrom against the Muslim minority in India, against what is happening in Kashmir. And so this is something that worries us. It's why the mainstream Indian media is playing this card. And in terms of our own media, I think our own media has been a little more balanced this time than it usually is. It has been, I think, a little more restrained also in terms of reporting on so-called violence without verification. In terms of the movement itself, the movement is very clearly at its core an anti-discrimination movement. And that gives me hope. That gives me hope for the future. And it's not just about regime change, it's about reforming the state, and it's about repairing the state. So that gives me hope that whatever vulnerabilities exist today are going to gradually erode away. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to, there are a few articles that have been published, I think, and some fact checking by BBC and Al Jazeera on to sort of the nature of some of the violence, and but also to underscore that immediately I've seen that student leaders separately and the interim government have met with different communities. I think they should do that with all communities, Adivasi community, indigenous communities, as well as other communities, LGBTQ communities. Like as Shireen Huq said, that there's a vulnerability for all minority communities, and that exists in the, everywhere, every state, where, I don't think we can sort of look at like US or India and not look at the vulnerabilities of my minority. So but I am heartened too by the way that the responses have been. So Lima, but there's a couple of questions that relate to sort of the politics as usual. So I hope it's okay that I address them to you, because I know that you are been involved in broader sort of electoral and democratic struggles. So how do we not revert back to the two-party state? There's been some talk about BNP, Awami League alliances. And so how do we kind of prevent that? That's one. And then there's a question about imperial intervention. There's been chatter, right, that this is a imperial.
Chaumtoli, can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Sure. I was saying that there are a number of questions related to the political structure, which I think you are very much engaged in. So I hope it's okay that I address it to you, because I think you addressed a lot of the labor challenges earlier. So the questions are, how do we not revert back to this BNP Awami League two-party structure? There is a threat that BNP Awami League might sort of join forces. Awami League may try to make a comeback through some kind of legal challenges. And there's question as to whether or not the appointment of Yunus reflects US interest and US imperialism. So I was wondering if you can address some of these like political questions and concerns. They're not the exact, so yeah, I'll just stop there.
Thank you, Chaumtoli. I think this movement is not just about the quota system. In Bangladesh, we are struggling for the democratic right, for voting right, and freedom of expression. And when the student was organizing the movement, and they also engage all the people of the country with them, it's not only about the solidarity. I think people feel that they are also not secured, and then they engage themselves to the movement for freedom of expression and for the voting right and democracy. And there are many questions raised after the movement and within the movement period about the two-party system, about other things. But I think that this mass uprising raised some issue about the accountability, about the absolute power of people, which means democracy. So I think that no party in our country will dare to show the same fascist way within people after this movement. And there is many discussion about the interim government, but maybe everybody is not feel good, or everybody support all advisor. But I think that we should congratulate this advisor also, because this advisor committee made after the uprising, and this is not the time. Maybe we have some critical view about different advisor, but this is not the time to think about this, because this movement actually raise issues about accountability. Nobody could be without accountability. So this pressure we can make on the interim government, that they must be accountable to people, they must be transparent, and this movement will pressure and this movement will make responsible this interim government to people, I think. So and I also think that when they will cover the interim time, then maybe they will declare election. But before that, they need to confront some challenges: corruption in bank system, corruption in our election process. We need some reformation in constitution. So they need to do many things, and after that, when they will declare election, I think in this time we cannot compare this time with other election in Bangladesh, because I feel that I am lucky that I experience and I am a witness of this historical moment of mass uprising. And I think this moment will create a new awareness about the accountability, about the democracy, and also the fascist regime. So Shima also mentioned that the fight against the regime is not only about Hasina, it's about the fascist regime, and we will not tolerate any kind of undemocratic way, undemocratic ruling, and we cannot survive with the environment of lack of freedom of expression. People already experience that. And they acutely experience when the whole country was like a black situation. No, you cannot move in evening because there is a curfew, no internet, no communication. Before that, you cannot communicate, you cannot express yourself as you want, because always there is a fear about getting different kind of torture from government. So I believe that we need to protect the aspiration of this movement, and yeah, we should work collectively to protect the spirit of this movement. Yeah.
Do you want to?
Can I add something here?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are some questions around specific around how caste plays a role. Shireen Huq, I don't know if you feel comfortable to answer that, but absolutely. Shireen Huq.
Okay, I think I just want to add that the demand from the streets was that we did not get rid of Hasina to bring in BNP. We want an alternative. And that was loud and clear. And I think that is what we need to pursue. And I hope that this interim government will facilitate that in some form or the other. The second question is that this was indeed a revolutionary moment. But a revolutionary movement could actually have provided a platform or a step towards more radical reforms. Now, whether this interim government will deliver on that, we don't know. And that has to be monitored as well.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I think that, to my knowledge, I mean, the historicness, if there's a word, is that I don't know of any other examples, I mean, even outside of South Asia, where you have a complete desire to form a new structure. And we have to keep in mind that the 15 autocratic rule was at all levels of society. So it's like, so holding an election without reform just would kind of devolve back to that. And so it is a very volatile, delicate period. And I think I echo everyone said that it's important to allow for the reform to take place, the changes to take place, and the structures need to be put into place, as Shima mentioned. But at the same time, I think that we do need to, the mandate is to eventually to have elections, because I think that that's going to be important, and managing that will be the role of this, not just the government, but I think Shima mentioned it, it's going to be, the movement will keep it accountable, and all of us will keep it accountable. So I want to, so many, yes, yeah.
Can I add quickly one thing? So I think it is really good, like we have a hope of the interim government, and we have a hope for the structural reform, which is anti-discriminatory system. But we are not supposed to forget, like when we say, like here in the movement, Trump is a fascist and we have to defend Trump. But we're not supposed to forget the new liberal government who is in the power. They are also the problem, genocidal supporter. Same thing, we're not supposed to forget Dr. Inus is personally the good person, but Dr. Inus itself is a new, like a moving forward the new liberal concept. The whole advisor team we saw, so we are not supposed to be thinking there will be the revolutionary left reform, but whatever the period we pass, we can even minimum expect something, the reform is structurally where the oppressed, marginalized, not discriminate, that level, which level we just cross. Like that's my hope. I'm not like hoping radical changes, because the whole advisor team, not a single person is left radical revolutionary leader. We're not supposed to forget that and not create the fake hope for the people.
Yeah, so we have 4 minutes left. So Nafis, I just want to put, we are going to transition to the end and the solidarity, and Ghazi sort of already got us to that. Couple of things is, from my understanding, and Shima can correct me, is that there's a reason why Muhammad Yunus, was put as an advisor, not as the kind of any kind of leadership. He's in an advisory role to the movement. I think we need to, the intentionality of the movement and the students, let us not underestimate their strategic choices, and that we'll go back into the streets if they don't do, and we don't have any precedent. I spoke to my South African comrades and I said, well, what did you do during this time period, and wrote a new constitution? And they were like, we're still trying to figure this out. This is an enormously inspiring, traumatic, and all rolled into one. So I think that we have to kind of understand the moment, and I think our guests were doing that. Let us transition now to, I was going to call you Nafis to talk about quickly the impacts within South Asia. What are we moving forward, next steps? How can we support this, the movement? There's been a lot of questions about supporting each of you. There's been a lot of questions also wanting to connect. Shireen Huq, Lima, particularly in Bangladesh. So there's a lot of people wanting to connect with you all to figure out how we can support you. So if you are okay, towards the end, please share contacts or how we can do that. But in the remaining few minutes, we're Bengali, so we can talk for a long time, but it's very late in Bangladesh right now in Dhaka. So Nafis, what's the impact in the region? What are some ways in which you think there could be solidarity for those of us who are not in Bangladesh, and to understand maybe the implications in our own movement work? Like, what lessons can we draw?
Yeah, first I want to say, like, Kaziafa is definitely, she hit the nail on the head with Dr. Yunus. I think somebody had asked on the chat, like, what do we make of Dr. Yunus' appointment? I would also remind people that Dr. Yunus did try to move into politics in 2007 with his Citizen Power Party under the caretaker government, but then he withdrew because due to lack of support. But yeah, I mean, so I will speak a little bit about solidarity within Bangladesh, because I think something that has gotten overlooked is how the Bangladesh army is currently treating the Adibashis in the Chittagong hill tracts, which they are currently occupying. So 30% of Bangladesh army is regularly stationed in the Chittagong hill tracts since 1975 when they took over the land. It's also interesting because people are putting a lot of faith in the army right now, but the army itself has its own vested interest because they have their, sibling corporation that, owns a lot of land and businesses, and military officers have, run without any accountability between 1975 and 1990 when the military was in. But so it is really important for people in Bangladesh not to center this movement as a Bengali movement. Yes, and the Adibashis are the indigenous groups that are in Bangladesh. They constitute less than 1% of the population, various reasons, for demographic reasons. And also there's been migration out of the country. And there has always been this contestation whether Bangladeshis are Bengali or Bangladeshis encapsulate everybody. And that has resulted in a lot of conflict, namely the civil war that Bangladesh went through. The Adivashi, the Bangladesh army. Which, I mean, ironically, Hasina claimed that because she she negotiated a peace accord in the Chittagong Hill Tracts in 1996, that she should have gotten the Nobel Prize Award, one of her main personal points against Dr. Yunus, right? So it is really incumbent on us, as Bengalis, to be standing in support of Adivashis who are in a most recent incident where the Adivashi students were painting graffiti on the walls demanding justice for Kalpana Chakma, who's a very renowned activist from the hill tracts, and she was disappeared by the army. And then the army has actually attacked the students who are doing the graffiti. And on the other hand, in Dhaka or any other city where predominantly Bengalis were engaged in similar acts, people were, in support of them, right? So that's a very big distinction. We need to that we have really internalized as a Bangladesh to be a country for Bengalis. We need to come out of that, right? Like Bangladesh is a country for everybody, right? That's been the slogan for the anti-discrimination movement, right? That has Shireen Huq pointed out. It's against discrimination of any kind, right? Broadly, geopolitically, there's going to be a lot of effects, but right now, I think the interim government is very much focused on rebuilding the country instead of focusing on the geopolitics, because obviously India's reaction to that, there's two reactions. One of them is the official reaction is that, yes, we want to protect our economic interests in the region, not destabilize the interim government and work with them, which they're saying publicly, right? But then there's the more subversive response, which the right-wing Hindutva trolls, who are ostensibly part of the BJP and RSS, right? They are promoting the exaggerated accounts of attacks on Hindu minorities in Bangladesh, right? And it's really stoked by the retreating regime, as Shireen Huq said, is because Joy today in an interview said that India should intervene and, India should ensure that the elections happen in 90 days, right? And that's something that we need to be very careful of. But generally, I think, because Bangladesh, it's kind of interesting that Bangladesh's politics are not very well known globally, but it does serve as a very important point in global geopolitics because it's a center of where Russia, India, China, and the US kind of contest against each other, as they did back in 1971 when Bangladesh was liberated, right? Like that was born in the crash of the Cold War, right? Like that was the big deal, is that America supported the West Pakistani army, whereas Russia had supported the liberation movement, and that kind of Bangladesh's birth was within that context, right? So in terms of the regional solidarity, right, I think one of the earliest signs that we saw were students in Kolkata marching and demanding justice, right, for the slain students, the murdered students at the hand of the state apparatus. And I think as we speak tonight, there was also a rally in Kolkata by students in protest of a victim of sexual assault and violence in a medical college. And I think we sort of should be looking at like, okay, where are the points of solidarity that we can connect our struggles, and you know, how can we stand up for them? And as we talked, as you know, Dr. Huq mentioned, that there was echoes of Palestinian student encampments and their fight against police in the Bangladeshi student movement. We also need to realize that because there exists a global military industrial complex that is propagated by the Western countries, and it's not just an idea, it's very much real, because the tear gas shells that were, you know, thrown, and the tear gas canisters that were found littering the university campuses were manufactured in the United States, right? So there is a clear line, and then there are parallels. For example, the Kenya's students who have started this movement against their own government, against a tax hike, right? They were able to get the president to retract the bill, right, and fire his entire cabinet because the students were out on the streets. So it is interesting to note, perhaps from a historical perspective, as this why this particular generation who are students right now are so active. Perhaps it is some kind of global climate anxiety that's driving everybody to reckon with, you know, future, that they need to take control of their future. Or perhaps it is the decades of, you know, in the global south, like of seeing that their countries are being exploited for capitalism, for imperialism, right? There's probably some kind of recognition, and something that has come out of Palestine or even the student protest is like how much politically developed this generation is compared to perhaps us or like the older generations, where they're able to recognize that to fight for their own rights, they need to take to the streets, right? And they cannot count on any particular hero or a technocrat or a general. And I think like the anthropologist from Prague University, Seuti Sabor, she wrote a really good piece in the Daily Star saying the same. We need to we need to believe in ourselves, that we need to fight for our own rights and for others, because we cannot put our trust in anybody else to rescue us, right? That's not how it works.
Thank you so much. So we do have a hard stop in 10 minutes. I mean, we can go on if you want, but I think it's very late. But there's been a lot of questions. This is for Shima, is about a student party, whether a student party is going to be formed, and just generally kind of how the student movement will continue as the interim government process is happening. And then I'm going to have everyone just end with kind of one sort of takeaway solidarity, and then we'll close there. So just to kind of give our audience, and I want to thank our audience. We're still 200 strong after over, and so I want to thank you for your patience. It's a lot of material, a lot of things. And I hope that, I just told Thomas, we need to have another one. This is not enough. So Shima, just start us off to close. Any closing comments? But student party, how to keep the student engaged, how's the movement going to continue moving forward, and how people can support the student directly, not necessarily the government. There's a lot of questions about that.
প্রথমত আমরা
First off,
একটা আহতদের জন্য একটা লিস্ট করেছি এবং এই
so we did
লিস্টে
make
যারা
a
যারা
list
আছে
for those who
ইমার্জেন্সিতে
were
তাদের জন্য
injured,
আমরা ফান্ড কালেক্ট করতেছি
and we are
আপনারা
collecting
চাইলে
funds for
সেটাতে
them. So
কন্ট্রিবিউট
if
করতে
you'd
পারেন
like, you can contribute to
আর
that,
আমরা
to
বাংলাদেশে
contribute to
যেই
their medical
সামনে
treatment
যে
costs.
চ্যালেঞ্জ গুলো আছে
In
সেগুলোকে
Bangladesh and the challenges we have
ছাত্র
in the
জনতা
future,
সকলকেই মোকাবেলা করার
as
জন্য আহ্বান জানাচ্ছি এবং
to bring unity
যদি
amongst the student
ছাত্রদেরকে
movements, we're trying to
আপনার
gain
লিডারশিপে
consistency and
দেখতে
understanding.
চান তাহলে অবশ্যই দল
If you want
করা
to see
হতে
more
পারে
student
এবং
leadership, you know,
একটা না আমি মনে
we
করি
could create a
স্বতঃপ্রণোদ করতে
political
দাও
party.
একটা না অনেক দল হোক
I feel like we
গণতান্ত্রিক
shouldn't just have one
ব্যবস্থায়
party, we should have multiple within a
প্রতিযোগিতা
democratic
থাকলে
situation.
আমি মনে করি যে সেটা
I
আরো
think
ভালো একটা গণতান্ত্রিক
having
ব্যবস্থা
more
হয়
parties
তো সেই ক্ষেত্রে আমি
strengthens the
মনে করি যে
democratic system.
যেই জেনারেশনটা হচ্ছে
So this
বাংলাদেশের জন্য
generation,
নিজের মাতৃভূমির
this
জন্য
generation
জীবন
that for
দিতে
its
শিখেছে
motherland,
সেই
for Bangladesh, learned to
জীবন
sacrifice its
দেওয়াটা
life,
সেটা যেন
sacrifice their
ব্যর্থ না
lives.
যায় একটা
We
নতুন
don't want
বাংলাদেশের
that to
দিকে
go to
আমরা যেন
waste.
ধাবিত
We
হতে
want
পারি
students who martyred themselves
you.
to have done it for a
Kazi,
valuable
as
cause.
someone who works in the diasporic community with many activist groups, what is the Bangladesh uprising revolution? What is something that we as activists here can take away? What are some points that can learn from this example?
So I just want to say, when we say transnational solidarity or transnational movement, it looks like a really bigger word. But if you go the narrow down, if you see in UAE, where the protest is abandoned, but 57 Bangladeshi worker protest and arrest and in jail right now. Think about the solidarity level. The people here in all over the country who is we call Prabashi, I mean migrant worker, who actually send daily to daily, weekly to money to their families, bread and butter. These people go to strike or not send the remittance to the ex-government. Solidarity level, their families suffer. They ask families, sell the property and manage the money. I'm not going to send the remittance to the country until we win. We need to support a student. So this is the transnational solidarity Bangladeshis migrants show. And I believe so this government always call us Kamla. I mean, we are day labor and we don't have any value. In our airport, we always disrespect because we are Kamla from Saudi, Malaysia, and so many countries. We don't have any manner, and these people show their solidarity. So I think as a migrant activist organizer, my commitment to the country, all kind of solidarity, all the learning is will build in like what I learning I'm going to implement in the movement, and what the solidarity needed my country need, I will do as much as I can. And another thing I want to make sure the Bangladesh free from those dushkritikari, I mean the corrupted people. But the bad thing is all dushkritikari, I mean corrupted, had the US visa and they will come today and tomorrow in USA. And they will make like a more noise in New York and more fight you will see in the communities. So this is the thing. We are very worried and we are thinking about how we can keep and calm and peace within our people. This is the struggle, like show the solidarity, calm the community, build something the political. It's very critical as a Bangladeshi activist myself, seeing the fight here and there within the community, even the Prabash, I mean the here. So this is my commitment for the Bangladesh, for here, and for my people.
Yeah, it's really important that you mentioned about the remittance boycott. I think a lot of folks didn't perhaps know that because I also work on migrant laborers and I was on chats in Spain and Italy. And you remember, these are folks who left and oftentimes crossing the Mediterranean in a dinghy boat and dying because they couldn't get jobs in Bangladesh. This connects back to the quota. And they had a day where they said, don't send remittance back. And it goes back to Nafi's point about the banking, the looting. The other is the immigration consequences. Ghazi, you had mentioned that it happens historically, right? That leaders go, I mean, Sheikh Hasina is in India. Everyone is fled the day before she resigned. Everyone fled. I was actually leaving back Dhaka that day. And so we might see them in countries around the world, in the United States. They have multiple visas back and forth because they have a lot of money. But they will also see that the immigration will impact poor people because the asylum will be denied. And this is something that Qazi had raised to me, which is really important. They'll say, oh, you can go back to Bangladesh now. You have a new government. And so the people who are most impacted are going to be. So we need to really work across, kind of across where we are, and to protect against that. I want to just bring in as a closure, Shireen Appa and Taslima, what are ways in which activists here, the majority of our audience, I think, are based outside of Bangladesh, how they can support your work, this democratic institution building. And then we started with Shima, and I think this all started with students, so we should end our session with Shima of like any last words of what you would like to share, and then we'll close out our event for today. So Shima.
Okay, we have just gone through an unprecedented phenomenon, and I think there are many lessons to learn from it, many lessons to learn from the young people who led the struggle and who fought the struggle. It is time, I think, one of the main lessons I think that should be drawn is it's time for both politics and governance to make way for young people to come in, to create space for young people to enter politics and governance. So it's time for older politicians to step aside, not only because of their failure, but because of also because a large number of them have proven to be corrupt and proven to be not to be selfish, proven to be selfish and not selfless like these young people are. So I think it's time for that to happen.
Great. Wonderful. So I'm going to ask Limapa to share last words about how the audience, because the Center for Popular Education is connected with our organizers and activists, so how they can support your work and the democratic institution building that's happening.
I want to add a few points about the previous question that you were talking, that in Bangladesh, maybe there are different political parties, they have different interests, and the different political power from different corner of the world, like US, China, India, they have their own agenda and own interests, but we cannot live only within fear, and we must confront, we must face those agenda which is against people's interests. I want to rely on young students, young people like Shima, like Nahid, Asif. And I was so moved when Shima was talking in this discussion, and you were asking her that how students become so disciplined, so strategic, how they win this historical thing. And I think that the situation, the political situation and the whole situation make them more mature. And I was really surprised when I was watching them. And still I'm really inspired. And I think this new generation, they will give us a new hope and new country. And I also think that when in our country there was repression against students, that time we saw that cultural activists, teachers, and other professionals, they are showing their solidarity. So this solidarity is very important, not only in our local ground. We want solidarity from global community, because we are not a member of Bangladesh only. We are also part of global community. We live under the same sky. So these kinds of solidarity that we are talking through this discussion, I think we can find different way to support. If we really want to support each other, this is not only support Bangladeshi movement. I think support or making bridge with each other will support all of our movement against racism and our movement for freedom of expression and democracy. Thank you.
Yeah, I think your last point is so important to emphasize, is that this, you know, and I think Shima mentioned it as well, is that this, what started as perhaps a, you know, quota reform is really about anti-discrimination, about anti-fascism, and we are seeing that globally. We're seeing that, and definitely in the US. I'm gonna ask Shima to say some concluding words, but there are three things I want to just emphasize, because I think, having been involved in organizing for many years, I don't exaggerate when I say that the level of sophistication, and I was in Bangladesh, and the level of movement discipline and coordination. I mean, I've been in a number of formations, also in Bangladesh, and everyone sometimes don't get along, as Shireen said, is just astounding. And there are 3 points I want to highlight. One is we have to build our movement skills, and there were coordinators, but they also activated sort of a very local level engagement, the university level. The students engage with local community groups. And so immediately you saw the protections of minorities, you saw students jumping in. And I mean, I don't think every parent in Bangladesh is going to be happy to see their child have a jharu and cleaning the streets, you know? I mean, it was really amazing. So movement skills, we have to build our movement skills. Political and theoretical grounding, right? It's not something you just sort of, you know, people sort of say, no, this is where the Center for Political Education is so important. We need to like really dig down and learn about what happened before historically. Why is it like this? What can we do differently? What are some models? And I think that those are things I saw in the movement, leaders, and inclusive, right? It was the way in which women, young girls, were in the leadership. And the way that they were so intentional that Amra Shamne Dar, I say, we stood in front, because you know that state violence wreaks havoc on their brothers much more. So I just wanted to kind of underscore these 3 things, that there's so many nuggets in this session, but for us as activists to really think about how we can bring this into our own movement work. How do we build our skills? How do we ground ourselves politically? How do we do this work in a sort of inclusive, be pragmatic, but at the same time, keep that hope. So with that, I love to have Shimapa end us out in any last words, and then I will hand it over to Thomas to close us out. And thank you so much for everyone's patience. I apologize. There are about 40 questions I see. I'm happy to afterwards to kind of figure out a way to get those questions to the individuals. I think this is the first of many conversations. So I'm going to have Shima have the sort of last word as the panel, and then hand it over to Thomas.
Okay. আমরা যারা আন্দোলন করেছি এবং যারা প্রত্যক্ষভাবে বা পরোক্ষভাবে আন্দোলনে ছিলাম, আমাদের একটাই প্রাণের দাবি ছিল যে আমরা এমন একটা বাংলাদেশ দেখতে চাই যেখানে যে কোনো ধর্মীয়, লিঙ্গীয়, যে কোনো পরিচয় সে যেন সমান মর্যাদায় বাঁচতে পারে, এবং এই বাংলাদেশে যে তথাকথিত উন্নয়ন হচ্ছে সেটা আমরা মানি না, সেটা উন্নয়ন হিসেবে আমরা দেখি না। সত্যি যখন
everything that was
উন্নয়ন হবে,
celebrated as development up until now, we don't see that as development.
বাংলাদেশ কোন পর্যায়ে যেতে পারে,
So we want the entire world to see how far Bangladesh can go and what development actually means. And those of us who are educated, we have the new generation, we have a huge responsibility to hold on to this independence that we've created and creating this beautiful Bangladesh that we've dreamed of. So those of us, everything that we fought for so that it doesn't go to waste, and so that we can create a new Bangladesh from the grassroots, and so that this dream, we don't want this dream to fall apart. We want to see it come to fruition. So what can I say? That this is what I want to close my statement.
Our speaker, thank you to all our speakers, particularly our Bangladeshi movement activists. It's very late in Bangladesh right now. And so I appreciate you all sort of being with us. I'm going to I'm going to turn it over to Thomas. And I also want to, I think he'll mention our co-sponsors. I want to thank all of them, really. I actually have worked with each of them over my time as an organizer. And so I want to thank you for really stepping up in this important moment. So Thomas.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chaumtoli, for masterfully walking us through this and facilitating this material. It's a lot of material. I want to thank everyone who joined us for sticking with us and also for providing some really thoughtful questions in the Q&A. We will try to share those with the panelists and get back to you with responses if we can. A special thank you to our language justice team, Rebecca and Nisar, to Tati from Asata from helping on the back end, and to all of our co-sponsors. We hope this will be the start of deepening your study and engagement on Bangladeshi politics towards providing meaningful solidarity to those in Bangladesh and the diaspora who are seeking true working class liberation. If you registered and attended this event, you will receive a follow-up email with resources from today's discussion, including information on how to learn more about the work of our panelists and their organizations, and to the degree that they're comfortable, the right contact information to their organizations and their work. And as I mentioned before, a recording will be posted on CP's YouTube channel, and you can stay connected to CP for future events by following some of the links that I'm dropping in the chat right now. So thanks again. We hope to have the recording up soon, and we hope this will be the beginning of our discussions in understanding the political landscape in Bangladesh. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.